Welcome to a bonus episode of This Week in Family Law, the go-to podcast for busy Australian family lawyers who want to stay updated without the overwhelm. In this episode, we're going to be providing you with updates that happened over the break. With me today is Antonia Cacapardo. Antonia, are you excited about Season 2?
I am. We have some really exciting episodes lined up. How about you?
We definitely do. Yes, I'm very excited. It's great to be back after a bit of a break.
I agree. So let's get into it. What's up, Brendan?
Yeah, so first up, we have a Law Society Journal article that discusses whether or not AI is actually quietly dismantling the traditional training and apprenticeship model for young lawyers. So the routine grunt work that junior lawyers once sort of cut their teeth on and earned their stripes on, being things like document review, first pass research, first drafts, that's getting increasingly done by AI. And the worry amongst the profession and people who are conducting this research is that juniors are now learning by fixing the machine or the AI's mistakes rather than building those skills from ground up, which is what they traditionally did. So that's a very different kind of training that junior lawyers are now going through.
Yeah, and it'll just keep changing as AI continues. So we'll have to see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely it's different thinking back to how we would have learnt how to do things, you know, the traditional way.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a part of the change in technology and the shift the way people do things. Like if you think about how many moons ago it would not have been email, would have been sending things by fax or post.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. You pick up new skills on how to actually use online platforms, you know, attend court hearings virtually and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And the junior lawyers will still need to know what to pick up on for the mistakes in the AI. So they're still learning that way. I think it'll just be a different way of them learning.
That's right.
The basics.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Antonia? What's up from your end?
Well, a quick one I have is that the Supreme Court of New South Wales is now on Instagram. So it's a way it's part of the broader push by courts to engage in the public, shed light on what happens in the courtroom and supports open justice.
That's great. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are slowly actually acknowledging that the social media platforms out there are actually a great avenue to actually reach a broader audience.
Definitely.
So it's actually interesting to see the courts themselves actually opening up an Instagram account.
Yeah, I know. It's something that you wouldn't have thought you'd see.
Certainly not 5 or 10 years ago, that's for sure.
Definitely not.
All right, so the next update from mine is that the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia is recruiting an experienced, innovative leader in a newly created role called the Director of AI Innovation and Transformation. And this position will lead the court's AI transformation program, driving the responsible, ethical, and secure adoption of AI to improve accessibility, service quality, operational efficiency and safety across the courts, which I think is actually a great concrete sign that the court's actually putting AI strategy at a senior leadership level, not just at a junior sort of entry-level position and not just talking about it. And it sounds like from the job description that the initial priorities include things like developing a multilingual chatbot capability for court users. So that's like a real sort of access to justice move
really,
right
really
here. And acknowledging that there's a broader court user base than the traditional English-speaking person.
Yeah, of course.
And also AI-enabled automation of high-volume registry and administrative processes tied to migration applications, which again is an area where often the people who are using the court or coming to the court are not from an English-speaking background.
Or self-represented.
That's right, exactly. So again, this whole access to justice push being driven by AI, which I think is fantastic. And it sounds like the role can be based in any Australian capital city.
That's
so it's
good.
not just limited to one place.
Yeah.
So I guess if any listeners are involved, we can put a link to the job description in the show notes.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. So one of the updates I saw was that the New South Wales Legal Profession Admission Board released its interim report on reform on practical legal training. The proposal embeds foundational practical skills into law degrees, adds a compressed, largely face-to-face pre-admission PLT course, which is around 3 to 4 weeks, and introduces a new post-admission legal training stream, which is not to be confused with the CPD, but rather involves assessment and includes specialist modules. There's an emphasis on face-to-face teaching, mandated First Nations content, and a structured work experience requirement. The report uses a family law example of the proposed new post-admission legal training stream, which is developed by a group of practitioners and is delivered over 4 separate days across a newly admitted lawyer's first 2 years. So I think that would be a really good push on getting some more legal training, more advocacy kind of face-to-face rather than what we're used to where it was 1 week in and then the rest online.
Yeah, I remember doing the rest online part
Yeah.
and doing a whole day on Zoom was actually really difficult to
Yeah,
focus. You sort of
exactly.
turn off your brain by, I guess, the halfway through the day
It's
because
much
it's
better
just
being
so
in
draining.
person.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things, especially with law, you can't learn from a textbook. I know
No,
people
it
have
needs to be
said that many
practical.
times,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where like you have to do it practically, you have to do it for real
Mm.
to actually understand how to do it properly.
Exactly.
And I hopefully think that all of these new changes that are coming into play will hopefully help young lawyers get up to speed a lot quicker and with a stronger skill set.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next update from my end is that the Queensland Law Society recently launched a public education campaign that says, for real legal advice, ask a solicitor on its You and the Law platform, warning people against substituting AI tools and free online resources for professional legal advice. And very cleverly, I think it uses AI-generated videos to depict everyday legal scenarios and the risks of actually relying on that informal or unverified information, which I think is actually quite clever.
Yeah, I think that's very important. You see a lot of people thinking they can do what they need to do as a lawyer now because they've got AI, but there's limitations and hallucinations and there's a lot of risk with it. So
Yeah.
putting that to the broader public is really important.
Especially because a lot of the foundations behind all of these AI or free online resources is actually based on the US system, which a lot of
Yeah.
it, if not most of it, does not actually apply here in Australia.
No.
So often, many times, you do see self-represented litigants or just your average person turning to these resources, not knowing the difference between the two systems.
Exactly.
And then, coming to you for the first time, coming into your office and seeing you thinking they're an expert when in
Yeah.
reality they've just read a whole bunch of stuff that does not apply to them.
100%. Yeah. One of my updates is going to the New South Wales budget. So after the budget was released in June, the Law Society of New South Wales released an article discussing how the budget left the state's courts behind, allocating them only $3 million to modernise their court technology against the $108.8 million handed to the New South Wales Police Force for their new technology upgrades. The President welcomed some measures such as enhancements to the Downing Centre, extra resources for the Industrial Relations Commission and Land Environment Court, and investment in integrity agencies, but warned that regional courthouses urgently need upgrades such as safe rooms for victims of violent crime or more audiovisual link facilities. So we'll see how this all plays out in the next year, but it's looking like we did need a lot more in that budget.
Yeah, I mean, looking at 3 million versus 180 million is actually a massive difference.
Yeah.
And, working in tech, I can tell you it's definitely not cheap to update systems.
Yeah.
I know the courts, especially the larger registries, did a massive overhaul when it came time to actually move everything online during the COVID period.
yeah.
But there's still a long way to go to make sure that, like you said, regional courthouses or smaller registries actually have access to that
Yeah.
same level of technology.
You don't want them getting forgotten or falling behind.
That's right, yeah. In a bit of a contrast, actually, the Queensland Law Society welcomed the Queensland 2026-2027 budget justice investment. Highlights include things such as $11 million over 5 years for additional Supreme and District Court judges, $29.3 million over 4 years for judges and judicial support, $22.1 million over 4 years for digital court systems, which
that's
is
good.
significantly
Yeah.
more than just the entirety of what New South Wales seems to be getting.
Yeah.
$8.6 million in the 2026-2027 year for Legal Aid Queensland, $6 million over 4 years for courthouse security, $10.6 million over 4 years for prosecution services, and $14.8 million over 3 years for the children's courts, plus $250 million child protection for the Child Protection Commission and $186.6 million to begin responding to the Child Safety Commission of Inquiry. So that's quite a lot of figures and quite a lot of numbers
Yeah.
there. But just looking at that very briefly, it does look like that Queensland is seeing a
They're
much
happy.
more positive
Yeah.
investment into their legal system, which is
Yeah.
in stark contrast to what
With
we
New
just
South
saw with New
Wales.
South Wales.
Yeah. I also saw that South Australia felt like justice was denied in their state budget as well. So an article published by the Law Society of South Australia said that it was failing them they needed urgent funds for court infrastructure for the for the new Supreme Court criminal courtrooms, safe interview rooms, remedial work, and trauma-informed redesign of the youth court. They are also introducing new judicial mediation fees from 1 July, so they're in place now, where it's $2,000 in the Supreme Court and $1,500 in the District Court, where mediation was previously free, so that's a change as well. The Society states that they were disappointed by the lack of new prevention, early intervention and rehabilitation measures to reduce offending, with law and order spending limited largely to prison upgrades and extra police, and it renewed calls for a review of the Adelaide Remand Centre. So again, they're not too happy there.
It sounds like police are getting the lion's share of that money as well
Yeah.
there. So I wonder what's driving these differences in the allocation of budgets. I wonder what's behind all that.
We'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Now, on a different note, looking at Victoria now, the Law Institute of Victoria published an article on the 20th of May where it's argued that lawyers need a minimum viable understanding of AI to recognise its limitations and also understand how they and their clients can use it safely and effectively. Now, I know we've actually talked about something similar on previous episodes of the podcast before, but it's interesting to see that other people are also sharing the same opinion. And it's canvassed in this article the challenges of AI in legal practice, the difficulty of actually regulating the fast-moving technology, cautioning against both uncritical adoption and blanket avoidance. And the underlying message is that competence with AI is actually becoming a part of a lawyer's professional responsibility, requiring enough literacy to deploy the tools appropriately while safeguarding accuracy, confidentiality, and also the client's interests. And I think this is actually really interesting because over in the US, the Bar Association has actually formally acknowledged that competence with technology is actually one of the duties a solicitor or a lawyer over there has to actually uphold in order to be considered competent or actually doing their job competently. So there's formal recognition there, and I think there's some of that coming over to here now.
I like how they say blanket avoidance is,
it's not ideal,
Not
which I think
ideal.
we see. There might be a bit of a response to, I think, the New South Wales Supreme Court's position, which we saw some time ago.
Well, practitioners just can't put their head in the sand. They're going to actually have to start to adopt AI and make it work for them and, be across all the technology.
That's right. Or at least to the level where they understand where it can actually be misused or essentially.
Just aware of it.
That's right, exactly. Otherwise, they're going to have no clue when they're faced with that challenge.
Yeah. I also have an article from the Law Institute of Victoria, and they're running a series of online CPD sessions where judicial registrars give family lawyers and general practitioners who handle family law matters first-hand insight into court processes. So all sessions are free, and we'll put a link in the show notes where you can find out more and register for upcoming sessions.
Having this sort of, again, free access to training and CPD style events
Straight
for
from the
practitioners
court.
is I mean, of course, thinking back to practice, I would have
Very
loved
beneficial.
to attend this. I might actually still attend anyway because I love to hear more from the court at all times. But that's definitely a step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We also found from the Law Society of New South Wales, they've launched the Indigenous Solicitors Foundation. So this is to help First Nations law graduates make the transition into practice. The article discusses how a number of First Nations solicitors in New South Wales fell. So we had 477 in 2014, and in 2025 it's 350. So the ISF is designed to help cover barriers such as practical legal training fees, IT equipment, textbooks and interview attire. The launch coincided with the Law Society's event honouring NAIDOC Week, and they're encouraging donors and confirm donations are tax deductible. They also thanked Gilbert and Tobin for providing significant pro bono work in setting up the foundation.
That's great news. That's great to hear.
Really
It's
good
always
initiative.
good to have that support, especially for First Nations peoples.
Yeah, I agree. The last update I have is an article from the Law Society of Victoria, and they've discussed a report from the Centre for the Future of the Legal Profession, which warns that junior lawyers are often left to sink or swim at the start of their careers, which increases the risk of low confidence, burnout and attrition. It explores making supervision work for everyone, the difference between small and large firms, the added complications created by hybrid and remote working, and it also considers supervision in the age of AI. I found it a really interesting read, and I think we should put it in the show notes for the listeners to have a look at.
I agree. And again, that recognition that support and training is necessary for early career or younger lawyers is very important.
Need
and
really good
especially now.
foundations.
That's right.
Yeah, to build on. Otherwise, they do feel like they're not supported. And
That's right. Especially now, as you mentioned, things like hybrid working arrangements, remote working arrangements, and of course, the age of AI. It's rapidly changing the way lawyers traditionally learn. And the skills they pick up, just like we were speaking about earlier in this episode, that's all very important for there to be some level of recognition of.
Yeah, definitely.
That's all the updates we have today. Thank you, Antonia. We've loved being in your ears this week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. If you have any questions or feedback, you can reach us by email or on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. Stay tuned for next week's episode. New episodes drop every Monday.